Joining me now, Semaphore White House correspondent Shelby Talcott and senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, Melinda Herring. Welcome to you both. Shelby, what can you tell us about the announcement about the top European leaders who are joining President Zelensky tomorrow at the White House? What are you hearing about this from the administration?
Well, I think the administration, when I've talked to officials, are sort of tempering expectations. You heard the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, sort of suggest as much. They're not looking at this meeting in terms of after the meeting, they're going to come out and have a ceasefire agreement or a peace agreement immediately, right? And you've seen officials, despite the president himself sort of hyping up, for example, the meeting with Putin, you've seen officials try to sort of temper those expectations. And so that's what they're doing with this. This is sort of seen internally as a stepping stone that will hopefully continue leading towards an agreement.
Do you hear from anyone it's going to be a bit of a counter to what they got on Friday with Putin? I mean, yes, not all the principal players are in the room together, so obviously you can't come away with a deal, but what's the likelihood that they'll be pushing back against what Putin wants?
I think that they're expecting that there's going to be pushback to what Putin wants. I think one of the key sticking points that administration officials recognize is the sort of idea of land swaps or territory agreements. That's been something that European leaders and Zelensky have been very forthright about opposing. That's also been something that Putin has been aggressively wanting this entire time. So I do anticipate when I talk to officials, that's going to be a topic of conversation. And so this is certainly going to be a push and pull between what Putin wants and between what Zelensky wants. But I do think ultimately the administration hopes to be able to get Zelensky and Putin in a room together.
Mm-hmm. So, Melinda, in terms of what the president wants, he said he wanted a ceasefire deal before he met with Vladimir Putin on Friday. It didn't happen. The next morning, he dropped that demand and then pivoted to pursuing a sweeping peace overall deal, one where Ukraine would cede even potentially unoccupied territory to Russia. Take a listen to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said about negotiations this morning.
These negotiations, in order for them to be successful, require for us to allow both sides to agree to potential concessions or discuss potential concessions without it finding its way in the public sphere and creating all kinds of internal problems for one country or the other country. So here's the bottom line. We all know what the elements of such a deal. There has to be talk about what the territories are going to look like and what the border lines are going to look like at the end of this conflict. And each side is, if there's going to be a deal, each side is going to have to give up on something. That's just a fact.
So, look, Rubio notably doesn't say what Russia would concede, and President Trump says it's now up to Zelensky to end the war. Is giving up Russia's illegally seized territory a non-starter for Ukraine? What do you think is going to come out of it on this topic relative to tomorrow's meeting?
Hey, Alex, it's great to be with you. So land and security guarantees are going to be the main conversations tomorrow. And it looks like in Anchorage that the deal that Trump and Putin discussed is that two of the oblasts called the Donbass, it's the Luhansk Oblast in the north, and then Donetsk would be given to Russia, and they don't control either of those 100%. They would freeze the lines in Kherson and in Zaporizhia down in the southeast, and then Crimea would be Russia's. And this is unacceptable. We've already seen comments leaking from Kiev saying this proposed deal would leave 1 million people in Russian occupation, and it would set a horrendous legal precedent. And I look at Marco Rubio's comments. He said that both sides need to give up land. The Russians aren't being asked to give up anything. There's also no talk of justice. I haven't heard either side talk about the more than 20,000 children that the Russian side has kidnapped or dealing with the thousands of war crimes that Russian soldiers have been committed. So I think that the deal that they talked about in Anchorage is a non-starter for the Ukrainian side.
NBC News, Melinda, reports that Trump spoke with Zelensky and European leaders Saturday about the U.S. taking part in a potential NATO-like security guarantee for Ukraine as part of this deal with Russia. Do you know anything about that? I mean, what a NATO-like deal would be like? And my question is, if it's NATO-like, why not just make it NATO? What's the difference? Is it even possible to put together NATO-like in a short and concrete period of time?
So that's the central question, Alex. I'm so glad you framed it that way. So could they do something similar to NATO? Yes, but there'd be all sorts of legal problems. There'd be all sorts of questions of enforcement. How long would this go along? What Ukraine wants is a legal security guarantee that it will not be attacked again. And if it is attacked again, Europe will have its back and the United States will have its back militarily. The only way to do that right now is through NATO, through Article 5. It's a collective defense treaty, and 32 members of NATO, if one member is attacked, will vote to come to another member's defense. Look, the issue is we don't know how this would work. No one is sleeping well in Kiev. No one thinks this is a brilliant idea. The only interesting thing is that the United States under Donald Trump is talking about providing some kind of collective defense once the war is over. That's the interesting point. But this is a half-baked idea. This isn't even, this is the back of the napkin idea, Alex.
Interesting. And then coming out of the meeting Friday, Putin indicated he had not budged on his demands, offered no details about what he and Trump discussed in that 3-hour meeting. I mean, Trump does appear to be siding with what Putin wants in a peace deal. Is there any indication that Trump actually negotiated on behalf of the U.S. and Ukraine when he talked with Putin?
So one of the articles I read, Witkoff claims that he was representing Ukraine's interests, and I see no evidence for that. I want to leave you with a little bit of optimism, though, Alex. Trump is a roller coaster. He's a yo-yo. You can use whatever analogy you like, but he's not an ideological president. So, it wasn't that long ago that he was screaming at Putin and threatening, horrendous sanctions. He knows about the issue of the abduction of children. We see Melania Trump also quite upset about this. We see Melania Trump reminding him about the indiscriminate bombings in Ukraine. So this is something that he's hearing about at home. And Trump has the ability to go back and forth. Look, he was seduced by Putin. He's always seduced by Putin. Tomorrow, the relationship I'm watching is Mark Rutte. Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, and Trump have a very strong relationship. Zelensky needs to be a consummate diplomat tomorrow and hold his tongue. He is extremely good on TV. He can read the room well, but he has a short fuse, and he has to control that tomorrow. He has to hold the line. But Mark Rutte has to do a lot tomorrow to keep reminding. I think tomorrow the name of the game is to remind President Trump that this is the United States of America. We hold the cards, not Vladimir Putin. And the Russian economy, the Russian state is not in a great position right now. So come on, man, step it up already. I think that's what Mark Rutte is likely to say in slightly more sophisticated language.
Shelby, in a Fox News interview after the Putin meeting, Trump gave the summit a 10 out of 10 because he and Putin, quote, got along great. He then went on that long soliloquy about everything from the border to tariffs to mail-in ballots. What that had to do with Ukraine, no one knows, but mostly avoided talking about Russia. Does this suggest that Trump thinks he may have failed at accomplishing what he said he wanted to do?
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing about Donald Trump leading up to this meeting was you really heard everything from him. You heard him talk about wanting a ceasefire. You also heard him caveat it at one point. He said that there's a 25% chance that the meeting fails. And so by sort of giving everybody every option on the table, you can come away with it and say that it was a 10 out of 10 meeting. But at the same time, I think it was clear Donald Trump's sort of ultimate goal, however unrealistic it might have been, was to leave with a ceasefire agreement. He did not get that. So I do think that there was some level of frustration. At the same time, you're looking at now Zelensky is coming to D.C. He is meeting with Donald Trump on Monday. A number of the European leaders are doing the same. So there clearly was some level of progress made, right? The president didn't leave the Putin meeting after 10 minutes. Perhaps that's a good sign, too.
Okay. Given your vast experience, Melinda, living there in Ukraine for 20 years, what is your sense from the people you talk to about how much they're willing to give away to stop the bloodshed and the kind of conditions that have to be met for Ukraine to agree to a peace deal?
Alex, the one demand you're going to hear over and over again is a real and lasting peace guarantee. The phrase that people are using is, we want peace, not a pause. So even after the Anchorage summit, the Russians hit Ukraine with 85 drones and another ballistic missile. That's what the Russians put up in the air. So we see no change in behavior on the Russian side, no desire for peace when you look at what they're doing on the ground. Ukrainians want peace more than anyone else, but they're unwilling to give up their land. And this is an existential fight. There is going to be some kind of compromise, but the compromise that's being talked about in Anchorage is not one that Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be able to sell to his people. Remember, this is a domestic issue too. He has to be able to convince millions of Ukrainians to not fight anymore. And he has to be willing to convince them that it was worth it and this was the best he can get. We're not there yet.
The worth it part, absolutely. Shelby and Melinda, it's very good to talk with both of you. Thank you, ladies, so much.